an honor to be here. Thank you all so much for this old country boy from Kentucky be here in big town Memphis. I want to thank Peter and the whole planning committee crew for blessing me with this experience. And a special thank you to Bertram, who I met a couple years ago in Atlanta at a Black Farmers Urban Girls Conference. I was there at Plum Food. And then he introduced me to Taliba, and I spoke this past spring as part of the Claiborne Temple essence of reviving the spirit of the sanitation workers. Actor Plum Food there too. So I'm here though, and back in the back here is one of our children here, one of our sons, Shagun, who lives in the Memphis area. And everybody to my son there, he's here to make sure I don't embarrass the family. But again, it's a delight to be here. Now, I was asked by Peter to talk about George Washington Carver. And I thought, Carver? Why? Because he was a big failure. Carver was an absolute failure. And I hope you all understand what I mean by that. But I'm going to do as I was asked to do and speak about Carver. And I'm being, as you know, somewhat facetious. Now, here are some of the elements of why he began as a failure. He was born around 1861 in an enslaved condition. His family, his mother, Mary, his father, Giles, his brother and sister were enslaved by the Moses and Susan Carver family in Diamond, Missouri. And before Carver was even born, his father died in a farming accident. Then Carver was about a few weeks old, and some night riders came to the farm and whisked them up and took them, they say, to Kentucky to sell them back into enslavement. Moses Carver hired like a bounty hunter and said, "Go get my folk." And the bounty hunter went to Kentucky, wasn't able to retrieve the mother and sister, but did pick up Carver, who was a few weeks old and very sickly, and brought Carver back to the farm. So Carver never really knew his mother. And you can bet that deep in his soul, he was singing, "Sometimes I feel like a motherless child, a long way from home." But he was at home. He was at home. Because Moses and Susan raised Carver and his brother James like they were their own children. During the years of enslavement and after enslavement, this is how Moses and Susan treated these two boys, like they were their own sons. So he was at home. And the ancestors understood that. Now, Carver was kind of sickly. And he wasn't asked by Moses to work in the fields. He was frail, weak. And says, "Okay, George, you got to work with the wife and learn all the elements of what women oftentimes do on the farm. The cleaning, the cooking, the gardening, the sewing, the knitting, raising the food in the family garden." Carver spent time with Susan learning those kinds of aspects of his life that were important for the rest of his life. But he was also allowed to spend time in the garden, in the forest, for the plants, the birds, the toads, the turtles, the birds, the trees, the fungi, were both his playmates and his teachers. his mentors. It was in the garden where he learned how to talk to the plants, and they talked back to him. And he spent his entire formative years learning from the garden, from the forest, learning from what they called Uncle Moses and Uncle Susan. Again, they were born down in Missouri. Pete, and all you venture capitalists and entrepreneurs and people who are part of the AGLaunch family, think about some type of collaboration between what is now in Diamond, the George Washington Carver National Monument. Because over there in Diamond, there's these vibrations going on in the land, in the soil. You should connect with. Spend some money. Spend some time. Take some kids over there. Find a way to lift up. I've been there every the last several years as my annual pilgrimage that way. Here's kind of a picture of how that family lived out in remote areas of Missouri, log cabin, wife, the husband, and their 2 sons. And Carver, again, his school was right here in this 4-person family for most of his early upbringing. Susan taught him how to read and write. But again, by all measures, he was a failure. Had no formal education, hadn't been to school. But around 12 years old, he and his uncle and aunt had a discussion and said, says, you learn it real quickly. We need to have you leave the farm and go to the ocean and begin your educational in a formal kind of a way. So again, he was a failure. He left as a 12-year-old. He had 1 change of clothes, no money. By all measures of today's youth, he was homeless, a vagabond, leaving home to walk 10 or 12 miles, nowhere to stay, didn't know anybody. By all measures, a failure. Could your children at 12 years old leave home and find their way? In the Osho, he entered the segregated school there. He slept the first night in a barn, and this dear beloved sister, black woman, Mariah Watkins, saw him. He said, "Boy, what are you doing in that barn?" "I just want to go to school." She said, "Okay, you come stay with me." It was this woman that taught him this deeper spiritual faith, the sense of serving your people, the sense of valuing education, and valuing who you are as a people with a proud heritage. This is where he began to acquire this sense of what the boys call the talented tenth, giving back to your community. But he did go to high school and graduated. He was 21 years old. Now, measured by measures today, if we have folk who come out of high school at this age, we call them a failure. They're dummies. It's how we judge people today. But he finished high school, and like many people of that time, once you finish those kinds of educational backgrounds, what do you do? You go west to become a farmer. And there were, as we know, after the Civil War, before the Great Migration of black folk moving north, our folk moved west. Why? Different reasons. One, because of the legacy and vibration of John Brown, and also because land was cheap. Land stolen was then sold for a few dollars. So Carver decided to become part of the exodus, moved out to Kansas, as all kind of families did back in those times, And he became what you call a dirt farmer. These are the homes that he probably built. And Carver spent, Bertram, 3 or 4 years trying to be a dirt farmer, even with a mule. It became difficult. And he was a failure, an absolute failure as a farmer. But because he failed, we now can enjoy the blessings of his magnanimous life. He left the farm and he decided to follow a passion of his, which was painting, art. Went to the school here at Simpson College, began to study music, but especially art, and he loved painting flowers because the flowers had taught him how to make a brush from a stem, how to make paint from pokeberries, how to make paint from the colored clay soils. That's what the plants had taught him. Later on, he even won a blue ribbon at the Chicago World's Fair in around 1898 because of his love of painting, especially flowers. He went to Iowa State. While he was there, this was the premier ag college at that time in the United States, partly because the dean of the ag school was Henry C. Wallace, the senior, who went on to become Secretary of Ag in D.C. His son, Henry H. Wallace, was a young kid, and Carver was his mentor. Now, Henry H. Wallace also went on to become Secretary of Ag and Vice President. Because of those relationships, Carver became friends and a counsel to all the presidents of his era. But you know, deep in his soul, there were other songs that guided him, such as, "Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt land, tell old Pharaoh, let my people go." That song probably Sister Watkins taught him. So he was ready not to go where the Pharaoh is, but deep, deep down south, where pharaohs lived and acted. But this image here is about a friend of mine. I work on a book about Carver. I've got permission to use this. This symbolizes that if you're talking about sustainable future, regenerative ag, if you're talking about, dense food, nutritious food, and all the things we talk about, and if he isn't part of your guiding light, I'm saying you couldn't be serious about it. That's how I feel about it. He's a guiding light that we have whitewashed and we blackwashed out of the curriculum, out of the school curriculum, out of the standard, out of the books. So the question becomes of AGLaunch and all the folks who are here, all the entrepreneurs, all the venture capitalists, when are we going to stop supporting that kind of white supremacy and lift them up? So, he was called to go, as you know, to Tuskegee by Booker T. Washington. Look here, it says, "Carver, I heard about you up in Iowa State, and we need you among our people. Sister Watkins encouraged you to serve your people." You know, there was an old phrase by the Black Panther Party. It says, "Power to the people, serve the people." We shouldn't forget that. Serve the people. So he came back, or he came to Tuskegee, and spent almost a half a century serving the people. And he came back to talk about how he could save and regenerate and replenish and nourish not just the black soils of Alabama and the South, but the black souls of the South. Now, talk about quantum science. Let's read this quote together. An injustice to the soil is an injustice to the farmer, and he meant black farmers primarily. And an injustice to the farmer is an injustice to the soil. That's quantum science. It says we're all the same source, we're all interconnected, and we're all interdependent. That's what Carver was saying. The theme is like the heartbeat of the work. And in my view, Carver represents the heartbeat of this work in 2023 and beyond. So the question becomes, how well will we embrace this heartbeat? I was asked, I do about 30 or 40 talks a year, and all of them in some fashion connect with Carver. Whoever I'm talking to and wherever. He's an important guiding light to the future. Now, it says that AGLaunch is about this regional transformation of food and economy around farmers, innovation, and inclusion. That's what Carver did for 50 years. That's what he did. The work you envision to do, that's what Carver did for 50 years in the South, around Tuskegee. He helped organize and encourage 2 million black farmers to become part of what's called back then the Black Farmer Cooperatives. And I won't go into all the details of things that he inspired. My point is, I'm saying that lift him up, embrace him, encourage him. I didn't see on the AGLaunch website, when I reviewed projects and things, anything about Carver. I'm sure that was like probably a typo or somebody was, left something out. I hope that you all will find ways to, now, again, my son Shay Gunn is here, and he's here primarily to make sure that as the Baba, I don't embarrass the family. Okay, that's why he's here. He said, hey, if you get up there and you get acting up, I'm going to pull you off the stage. And here's why, because back in June, I spoke at it in California at Stanford University, okay? Our daughter, his sister, works at Stanford, and she's like, a VP for DEIB. And then she has a dear colleague named, Sister Shirley Everett, who's the vice provost. I call them big dogs out there. And I spoke out there in front of about 400 people. Many of the people were part of the faculty and the staff of what's called the new Dorff Sustainability Center. The Dorff family gave Stanford $1 billion to begin this new center. And the old country boy was asked to come out there and shed some light on this new center. Went to their website too, and read what they were talking about, sustainability. And I must say I disagree with about half of it. But anyway, so these frameworks here were my pathways to a sustainable future. And if you go on their website and see what they wrote, of course, this is Stanford, and they're stressing technology. I understand that. Like you all stressing here, technology. But my point is that all these elements here involve technology. But it doesn't view technology as the main solution. So again, Shay Gunn's sister says, Shay Gunn, you gotta go there. He came to Stanford, he acted a plum fool, okay, and he got a standing ovation, and we even paid him, okay, so, but here's my pathways. Earth-centric, woman-centric, indigenous wisdom, George Washington Carver, arts, youth, and hip-hop, seed work, Terra Madre, transformative vision. I go around the world a lot, and I travel a lot, and I hear hip-hop everywhere. The young kids can memorize 100 different songs, word for word. Now, again, I visit y'all's website. And I get old, I got old eyes and stuff, I can't see very well. I saw nothing in there about youth and hip hop. I'm saying, Call Queen Bee. Now, don't mean the honey, I'm talking about Beyonce. Call some Lizzo, call some Snoop, call some... I'm saying, don't talk to me about sustainable future. You're involved youth, art, and hip-hop. I'm getting ready to get finished here. Pete's looking at me, giving me the evil eyes. Okay, now you long enough. Anyway, I'm just teasing. Earth-centric, woman, what does that mean? It means that we have spent 500 years in a homo-centric, human-centric framework that has brought us to the edge of what we call the sixth extinction. We need a worldview that is earth-centric tied closely to woman-centric. And here's some examples of how this has manifested itself globally. Hope you all know about Embry, her work in Kenya with the Green Belt movement, where she and her sisters planted about 30 million trees to deal with or to provide what we call this reforestation in Kenya. But what they also did, they employed 900,000, now I didn't mess my words up there, they gave 900,000 women entrepreneurial efforts within this whole Green Belt movement. It's called Power to the People. We spend too much time thinking that university researchers, corporate people, have the answer. I was in Hawaii, a couple years ago on vacation, where it burned down here a few months ago. Friends of ours were there. But we didn't provide the people's understanding of how to themselves respond to the fire. They came out real quickly. They came out with the firefighters, put out the initial fire, then they left. People kind of waiting around for what? For them to come back. Rather than being educated and trained how, okay, all hands on deck. Get out the water hose, get out the axes and shovels. I'm saying the key to resilience is not a few, but it's the many. And one Embry dealt with that. Behind this was another screen about local sustainable food system and what it looks like. I use that to raise this question, as I do often when I'm speaking about what is the very first local food, because the answer that I'm giving is hardly ever mentioned at a local food summit. You can answer on your own way, what is the very first local food? You probably won't get it, because it's always ignored, and that's breastfeeding, breast milk is the very first best local food. Now, how in the heck have we separated all these years this important aspect, this foundational, essential, for 2 or 3 million years, that's how humans first ate. So we need to find ways again to add this dimension to our food and ag work, where we can create images of women being rooted in the soil, but not just women, all of us, men, children, because again, the word woman contains woman and man, female contains female and male. How do we become rooted? Because the seeds of the future lie in women. Images like this ought to be on the website, so it's inspiring. Just saying, art. Now, one of my favorite images is one here. This is the book I have in the back. I'm doing a commercial here. The sister Natalie Bazero wrote the book Queen Sugar that Oprah Winfrey discovered, bought the rights to it, became a TV series. She got an offer from HarperCollins to do a second sequel about farmers of color primarily, and she asked me to write an essay in there. The essay is called Ancestral Vibrations, Guide Connections to the Land. I have in the back of my backpack. It's a little essay copy. If you want one, please let me know. Another great book is Farming While Black. I call this book the Bible of the Century. Again, Leah Penniman. On the previous cover was Leah and her sister Naima carrying the hose. In my view, that's the iconic image for the century. Not just about black women returning to the land, because again, women constitute the whole community. Men, children, returning to the land. back during the during World War II, if you recall, if you're around that long, the iconic image was Rose of the Riveter with the big, powerful biceps. This is the image I'm saying for the future. Indigenous wisdom. Now, I'm cool with doing a land acknowledgement. But I'm even ice cold, meaning more in agreement, if we let people who are indigenous speak for themselves. Now, Katie was with us here in Nashville several days ago, and we invited the chief of Oklahoma Cherokee, we invited the chief of the Eastern Band, we invited 20 tribes in the Southeast, we invited local people. I'm a believer, let's move beyond someone other than indigenous people during their own acknowledgement. They're here in Memphis in Tennessee, okay? Now, the idea is that we all should become knowledgeable of this indigenous wisdom wherever we reside. 500 plus nations all across what we call Turtle Island. I encourage, Montana passed a law about 15 years ago. It's called Indian Education for All, which means K through 12, every student has to learn about indigenous culture. This ought to be a part of every organization. Beyond just that acknowledgement, how are you teaching your staff, your collaborators, your people about this important wisdom? Please do me a favor. Copy this. This is a short film, Sweet Mother Coming Home. It's about seed rematriation by some dear friends of mine, Roy and White. Now, what's going on globally is this effort around rights of nature and Mother Earth, which means it's a jurisprudence. It's like laws in the Constitution, laws in your city government, laws in your state government. Every organization, Pete, I'm picking on Pete, okay, he's up close. Even within AGLaunch, ought to have within its organizational bylaws, mission, statement of purpose, rights of nature and Mother Earth, embedded in your organizational constitutions. George Washington Carver, I mentioned him already. He brings us back to the country's founding contradiction. Stolen land from indigenous people, stolen labor from African people. Working again with black stolen black souls all throughout the South. He inspired, because he was friends with the presidents, the Victory Garden movement of World War I and World War II. Green Vision, this book here ought to be on everyone's library. It's a Green Vision of Ford and Carver that talks about making everything involving industry from ag products grown by American farmers and growing them regionally. Now, images behind here is an image of Thomas Edison and Einstein. They were friends with Carver. And these two guys, who were well-known scientists, said Carver was the greatest scientist of their era. We talk about Carver's relevance. It was through Carver's friendship with Gandhi that King was inspired to adopt Gandhi's nonviolent philosophy. I have an article on the web, it's called The Cup of Carver. You might look that up, because a cup means that Carver represents a cornucopia. All these elements: integrated crop farming, agroforestry, intercropping, crop rotation. All the things that Carver talked about. Now, I was going to throw something out in the audience. I think I still will, so it's kind of like, who was catching some corn? Who was catching sweet potato? Okay. Let's add a little something to the... Now, I'm about to get through here. Now, the relevance of George Washington Carver. Up in the Star Lab, NASA has a collaboration with Tuskegee to grow sweet potatoes in the Star Lab. Why? They're talking about long-range travel to Mars and wherever. What are they going to eat? I call them the astronauts rather than astronauts. They, through reading about Carver, and he has 3 bulletins, I asked all of you who are the venture capitalists and other people, reprint his 44 bulletins and make them free like he did, because they're all relevant. But NASA said, Carver talked about eating not just the tuber, eating the leaves. Jeff in the Skylab, don't eat the tuber, it'll be all gone. Eat the leaves and they'll sustain you. That's what he did. Ending up, I won a James Beard Award back in November. I wrote this book, I co-wrote this book here. Final quote is that not only is another world possible, on a quiet day, I can hear her breathing. Thank you all.